It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And how do you know that it's officially draft season at Camp Dynasty? Because it's time for a real ass mock draft.
Yeah, it's about damn time that we got a real mock draft. The college football season regular season is behind us. We had our college football playoff controversies. The people are in, people are out. We're heading into the next phase of what we do here, which is all of our postseason leading up to the draft rather than the in-season, the badges and the week-to-week tracking. Now it's time to sum it all up, our end-of-year conclusion with a nice mock draft to put a bow on everything.
Yeah, as the college football world is currently burning to the ground, we're just walking away from it all. Like, you got the Notre Dame shit, and then you got Sharon Moore getting fired today, and it's just like, what's going on? I don't know. Let's talk about the draft.
Yeah, right. I don't know which of these guys are going to the league. That's what I care about.
So we've done a mock draft already for 2026. However, it was in July, and we also used theoretical landing spots as well. So it was a little bit more of a like, if this were to happen, what does this class look like? And I remember at that time, it's like Nick Singleton is potentially a first round pick, and he's going like third overall in the class. And I think you and I both didn't really expect that to happen. So we are going to be talking about it now from kind of our vantage point with the work that we did in the summer, and then of course, most importantly, what these players showed us in the 2025 college season. Of course, what follows this mock 2.0 for us at Camp Dynasty is our rankings 2.0 series, which if you've been with us before, you understand is kind of like the core of what we do here. That is where we are diving all the way into the film for all of these players. We're getting our thoughts in order, and that is kind of like the encyclopedia of our takes for the class. And then we will spend the next few months talking about the Senior Bowl and the Combine and the NFL draft itself and all of that. But it's really the next few weeks where we learn everything that we want to learn about this 2026 draft class. So I say that not only as a bit of a teaser, like that's right around the corner, but also this mock draft, like things could change theoretically if once we dive deeper into it. And I think probably more so at the back end of this round is where we would notice more changes. I think the top end feels pretty set, feels pretty like we kind of have a good grasp on what's going on there. But there could be, of course, some changes over the next few weeks as we dive deeper into this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think since the season's ended, we've both tried to do a little more homework, so it's not just copy paste from midseason, or it's not just like a couple tweaks here and there. I know my rankings now are quite a bit different than they were midseason. Yep. I think a lot has changed. I've watched a healthy amount of all 22 as much as I could to like prepare for this, but there will be like a lot more in-depth player by player in those ranking series as we go down the list. So that'll be like Austin said, where we're looking at like the encyclopedia. That's our takes where we actually set them in stone and we're like, this is what we believe. Some things can change, with the Combine and with Senior Bowl and all that stuff, but that's mostly, it's not really going to be the top guys that are going to be hugely affected by like testing numbers and stuff that they do in shorts and stuff that they do, on the blackboard or whatever. Then next would come landing spots, which is obviously hugely impactful for certain positions and certain they're, not as impactful. So we'll see, as that comes to be, what that's going to look like. But for now, mock draft and then that ranking series will be a big one for us.
Yeah, the fantasy regular season just wrapped up. Your pick is, if you're not a playoff team, your pick's locked in. Let's take a look at what player you might be getting in that draft position. And then if you're joining us for the first time, stick around and hear a lot more about that player and the rest of them in the next few weeks. But let's get into it. Let's kick it off here. 101 in the 2026 dynasty rookie class, and this one I won the coin toss to have the honors to make this selection, and here is one that is not changing at all. This has been the case since the summer, since the first mock, since everything we talked about in terms of our preliminary summer rankings. This was always the guy, and it still is at the end of this college football season. And that, of course, is Jeremiyah Love. And I say, of course, because I think even if you are just now getting yourself familiarized with the 2026 draft class, I feel like you know who Jeremiyah Love is because he's that kind of player. He's that kind of talent. And we really saw him come on down the stretch of the college football season and put himself into that Heisman conversation. We talked about him on the midseason rankings update show that we did around week 7, and it was kind of like he's having a good year, but like let's see him hit a new gear in the second half, and then we can start really talking about him in a similar light to players like Bijan Robinson and Ashton Genty and some of the real high end talents at running back we've seen come through Camp Dynasty, and I think that's what he did. I fully expect that when we really get intimately familiar with his 2025 film, that it's gonna I'm probably gonna like him even more than I do right now because I feel like that was the kind of season he was having. And he's a no doubt 101 sort of a talent. And anybody who ended up with this pick is, I think, gonna have a blast with this player next year.
Yeah, if you had a 2026 pick that was in doubt, and it was like, yeah, this is going to be a high 2026 pick, you kind of feel like you hit the lottery if you got 101 because I think that Love is in a tier on his own, and I think that that's pretty, I say that pretty easily.
Agreed.
There's other guys that I like at the top of this draft, but there's nobody that I feel as comfortable with as I do with Jeremiyah Love. So, yeah, he had that stretch down the back half of the season that we were kind of hoping for. We looked at, I think it was after week 7, that NC State game, where we're like, yeah, he's solid. Doesn't get a ton, not getting a ton of volume, whatever. And then he follows it up with like 228, 136, 147, 171, and then, 94 and 66 yard games on the ground. It's like, all right, there's a touchdown in every game but one. He's kind of cut from the same cloth as Bijan, when you talk about like the archetype of a running back, where he's so shifty. He has that like those hard cuts that just set people completely off balance and finds those backdoor lanes on these like stretched out zone plays. This Notre Dame line is awesome, by the way. Like watching the all 22 of this Notre Dame, it's like, man, some of this is just perfectly blocked up, which contributes to this season. I mean, he did have 900 yards after contact, so it's not like he wasn't doing any of the work, but there was definitely, he had a little head of steam and it got to make some second level, third level guys miss more often than not. And that's why you see, some of these like huge games where he's hitting his head on the goalpost on some of these plays, where most games he has a rush of 30 yards or more, and there's only a few where he didn't hit that mark, and a lot of those were early in the season. And you look at like the game against Pitt that we talked about, or against Syracuse that we talked about, where he had 8 carries for $171 and 3 touchdowns, and it was just like every single play he touched the ball, it felt like he was a threat to score a touchdown. So he kind of has a little bit of everything that you're looking for in a running back. He can showed this year a little more that he can handle more of a workload, even if he's not like an every down heavy workload back. But he also had a couple stretches where he was, getting good amount of targets and catching some passes. So he showed that he had the chops to do that. So I am supremely confident in Jeremiyah Love. I feel good about him. Like I think I'd put him behind like Bijan and Genty, but not that far. Those guys are like pretty. I don't want to put the G word out there, but
Right.
they're quite good.
But that's the thing is I feel like we go into with that sort of a mentality where it's like you got to prove that you're on the tier with those guys. And I think, I am with you right now, but I could also very much see a world where when I really dive in and get into his film, that he enters that sort of conversation, because you talk about a player here that has the blend of power and speed and elusiveness and can catch passes and create in space and do all of those things that running backs that are becoming superstars right now in the NFL are doing. Like he fits that new kind of prototype sort of back that we're seeing really explode and take hold of fantasy right now. So I know we've kind of like tongue in cheek thrown out like Jahmyr Gibbs sort of vibes with a player like Love, and that's, again, it's not going to be a 1-for-1 because it's a different size and a little bit of a different skill set. But I think that's kind of the general vision for what you'd be getting with Love, is a player that might not be leading in touches by the end of the season, but that's going to maximize the touches that he gets and create a lot of explosive plays.
Yep, absolutely. That's the key, is like the efficiency that he delivers on the carries. It's just like makes it look so easy. 7 yards a carry on the season. It's just like it's similar to what Genty was doing on like a much higher volume with Boise State. Genty, I mean, kind of grinded it out a little more than Love does. When Love, it feels more like he's just kind of flowing through the defense, and it's just like falling forward all the time. Sometimes he's jumping over a guy, and sometimes he's like hitting that hard cut, and the safety is kneeling in the dirt looking at the wrong sideline. It's like, oh man, that's tough.
Well, we will talk much more about Jeremiyah Love in a couple of weeks, I believe, was when we're talking about running backs. But for right now, let's close that chapter. 101, sign, seal, deliver, Jeremiyah Love, which means you are on the clock at 102.
Yeah, and this was, I'd say, an easier pick than I thought it was going to be. There was, I have a 3 wide receiver tier here after Jeremiyah Love, and Jordyn Tyson is atop it. And there was a little bit of question of the other 2 guys that we'll get into, I'm sure, shortly. But I ended up revisiting, the early, because Tyson has basically been injured since week 8 and has been without a quarterback since mid-October. So Sam Leavitt, who is Arizona State's starting quarterback, got hurt, I guess, at the end of October in their game against Houston. And Jordyn Tyson got hurt in the Texas Tech game, or after the Texas Tech game, and hasn't been seen since. Or he has. He played against Colorado and Arizona, but in kind of a limited fashion.
He got hurt again in the Arizona game.
Right. And so played limited against Colorado, only played 17 or 19 total snaps, and then played 6 snaps against Arizona. So it's easy to kind of out of sight, out of mind with Jordyn Tyson, and kind of forget what the beginning of this season looked like for him and what he was doing and what he was on pace to do. And you might look at like the total stats and be like, if you're just kind of thumbing through all these guys and you're like, 711 yards, whatever. Let's break down, like, this guy is a freak. He is an excellent route runner. I mean, might be the best route runner in the class. I think that's like, there's more guys to watch. There's a ton of guys in this class, but when it comes to separating and getting the top of the break and finding separation on these plays, looks awesome. And then he's also great with like contested catches. He was better running after the catch this season. So I look back and it's like, man, I almost forget how good Jordyn Tyson was. at the beginning of the year because it's like been so long and these other guys have played really well and worked themselves maybe up into this conversation. And I think mid-season we had the question of like, it's pretty close between Makai Lemon and Jordyn Tyson, and like it could have gone either way, flip a coin. And now since then, we haven't really seen Tyson play, a full host of snaps in a game, save one game. So regardless of all that, it's like going back, revisiting. This is why I had him at wide receiver 1, and not that hasn't changed for me.
I agree, and this is one area that I have had a chance to dive a little bit into the all 22 from this wide receiver group, and specifically on the top end. And I came away with the same experience of like, yeah, Makai Lemon has been a more exciting name to talk about this year. And we have another wide receiver that's in this tier from the Ohio State University, and we know about those players as well. I just feel like what you said about out of sight, out of mind, I feel like that is a very real thing with Tyson, where if he had not had to overcome some of the things that happened this year with this Arizona State team, not only, and it wasn't even just, Levitt getting hurt and him having injuries. It's like this team in general was much worse than it was last year as well. So there's that element. And so it's just comparing it to last year, it was just like a very different season overall. And we saw what he did last year, and he came in as easily the wide receiver 1 for us in this class in the summertime. And watching his film from this year, I saw, essentially the same things that I was seeing from the summer, which is exactly what you were talking about with the peer separation ability at all 3 levels. He's one of these guys that understands how to create space, can beat man, can beat zone. He's, running pretty much every route at Arizona State. I mean, I don't know that there was a primary route on the tree that I didn't see him run at least a few times this season. He's a player that can win deep as well. Not he's not one of these like burner wide receivers, but he's one of them that has enough athleticism and enough nuance in how he runs routes to consistently win over the top. You think about a player, and again, we're a little bit generalization here. This isn't a comp, but I think about like how JSN has been this season in terms of like JSN was not a 4-4 flat player, but he is consistently winning vertically this season and is one of the best deep threats in the NFL this year. And it's because of how he sets up those routes and how he's able to, get over the top of defenses consistently with his technique and his, the athleticism that he has.
Who could have
And
thought that would have happened?
Right, exactly. But I think Tyson is kind of cut from a similar cloth in that regard, where he's not going to be the fastest guy in the underwear Olympics, but he is going to be a guy that can win vertically in the NFL. The only things with Tyson, and we'll obviously talk a lot more about this when we talk about him on wide receiver 2.0, but I think one thing that has closed this gap for me personally with these other 2 guys, because I very much have them on one tier. This is not a situation where it's like, yeah, Tyson, and then like these other 2 guys are also like, it's a very flat wide receiver 1 tier for me with these 3 players. And I think one of the reasons with Tyson is like we got a little bit more of the yak skill this year. You saw a little bit more of that, but that's still not really part of his game. And I think that's one of those things where when you look at the modern NFL and the wide receivers that are really successful and putting up a lot of fantasy points, I think a lot of those guys have that ability to create yards after the catch. And we've seen some, even higher end talents that don't possess that skill that are a little bit upside capped right now. And it seems like, so I think that's maybe one of the areas with Tyson that you're going to get more out of, certainly at least another one of these wide receivers in this tier that we're going to talk about shortly. But that's just one of the, few weaknesses, if you'll call it a weakness, that you can point to in his game.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a strength. And I think, the modern NFL, you kind of look at, I like liken it to the mobile quarterback where you have two plays in you. Every time that a play is called, you have the play that is called in the huddle, and then you have the scramble drill that basically, we trigger once the play breaks down. That's kind of how a receiver with really good yak ability has for your offense. Is like you have the play is called, you hit that comeback route, you can walk out of bounds, get 12 yards. Or you have the guy that's going to shimmy and get you like 7 more yards and, maybe break a tackle and take it to the house. That's the, next step of like, how do you go from really, really good wide receiver that is open all the time and, catching these balls and getting you first downs and turning out, commanding targets and turning into, Jamar Chase, where he's, a threat to take the top off the defense. And yes, he's the best wide receiver in football, but that's why he's the example I'm using. Is like yes. he has a little bit of everything where he can separate and he can run after catch and he can take the top off. And it's like if you can take 2 of those skills, and be Jordyn Tyson, be able to separate and run after catch a little bit, then you become like in that elite tier and maybe not work your way all the way up to the top. But, JSN has moved himself into wide receiver 1 without being a burner because he's such a good separator and he's good after the catch.
So this exact conversation is going to be a great segue into our next pick in this draft.
Yep.
103. I'm back up and I'm going to take Makai Lemon. Makai Lemon was my wide receiver 2 coming into this season, but the growth that he demonstrated this year exceeded even my wildest expectations. Like we came into the year and I was like, I like this player a lot, but he's a little bit more, he's not as well-rounded as you'd like a player that you're talking about as wide receiver 2, as potentially a top 5 pick in the upcoming dynasty rookie class. He put all of that together and more this season at USC. I mean, this is a player that I really liked in the summer. His acceleration, his burst, his ability to close space, to be a deep threat from the slot. Also, a good separator on top of that. He wasn't running a ton of routes at USC, and that's kind of one of the things that I think we get with this offense kind of every year is like they're not asking them to run the entire route tree. And especially with Lemon, who was playing, very almost exclusively in the slot last year. It was very much like even in situations where they like didn't have 3 guys on the field, he wasn't out there. And when they were in the red zone, he wasn't even out there. Like it was like that kind of a limited role for him. This year, he just became the do-it-all, go-to wide receiver for them. And the number one thing that he added this year is the ability after the catch. Because honestly, his 2024 film, I actually thought the yak ability was a little bit of a negative. Because I saw a player that had a lot of twitch, that had a lot of burst, that was playing from the slot and wasn't really making guys miss and wasn't really getting yards after the catch when he's working in the middle of the field. And this year, it's like the switch just completely flipped and he just found it. And what ends up happening then is that you have a player that, he ends the season with 1,156 yards and 11 touchdowns. And then within that, he's got 20 missed tackles forced, which was, I believe, top 5 in terms of pass catchers in college football. And he had the yak number was 6.4 yards after catch per reception, which is, pretty high. So, and we saw him make, a ton of those plays where it's not just like, yeah, he's picking up some yak. It's like, he's catching the ball in the middle of the field, making 3 guys miss, and then just housing it. So I think when you see that kind of ability from a wide receiver, and this is the segue where it's like we're talking about the modern NFL and what are the wide receivers that are seeing the most success right now. And I think there's an argument to be made that Makai Lemon might fit that mold a little bit cleaner than Jordyn Tyson does. And so I don't think it's, it would be crazy if you had some people in this class that maybe even preferred Lemon to Tyson. That's not me today, but I'll say that the gap is very, very tight.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That's why these three guys are in a tier. I think they all kind of represent a different archetype of receiver that is successful in the NFL right now. And I think, Lemon's play style is maybe best suits a lot of these offenses that are, pretty in vogue right now, where you're relying on establishing the run early, getting to play action, hitting these guys in stride over the middle, and letting them, get a few extra yards. And Lemon also, like, tough as nails, I notice. And he's got, like, a high motor where we're, like, backside, far hash. We're, like, on the numbers, opposite side of the field. We're running it to the left. Makai Lemon's, like, damn near at the sideline. And he's running this guy off, like, 30 yards downfield. Or he's coming all the way across to block a safety, like, sprinting at him. And I'm like, this is not, you don't see this out of star players. You don't see this out of, like, number one guys where they're going to, take their, when the play's going away from them, they're saying to the cornerback, hey, man, run's going that way. Let's take it easy this play, and hey, more power to you. I respect it. But Lemon feels like he's got high energy, high motor, and these are the guys that, stick around. These are the guys that stay on the field, that you can, run an insert, like a C-gap insert for him out of motion, like they do with, like, you see, like, Puka Nacua running these routes where he's, like, coming in and, like, sometimes he'll be going to the second level, like, putting it on a linebacker because Kyron Williams is coming in behind him. But I think you could do that with Lemon, even though he's much smaller. He's 5'11", like $190, but he has that, like, energy of, like, I'm gonna come fuck you up. And so that's awesome. But he's also an excellent receiver where he's got this, like, twitchy, like you said, this twitchy ability at the top of his route where he's exploding in and out of his breaks, catching the ball and then doing something with it when the ball's in his hands, helping his quarterback out on scramble drills. He's finding zones. He's sitting down. He kind of understands the flow of the offense where he's on time. And once that, like, he's got, how the quarterback has to have the internal clock and it's got to be 1, 2, 3, ball's gone. You're sitting in the pocket. We got to get rid of it right away. Feels like Lemon has that same kind of game sense where as soon as, that route doesn't hit on time, he's like, okay, how do I help my quarterback? Like, well, what's going on back there? And if he'll take a look back, see that his guy's scrambling around. And he's like, all right, we got to get to a spot where we're open and available for him. So I think that he is going to be, a boon to a modern NFL offense. He's going to help out and be an instant impact kind of guy. Maybe, add some strength if he's going to add some size, if he's going to play, this tough and hard all the time, because we know the NFL is a different game than college football. And especially, at least they're Big Ten now with USC. So they're playing against, some of these, harder teams, quote unquote, where there's smash mouth and all that. But I was really impressed going back to and revisiting Lemon and what he can do for modern football, quote unquote.
It's going to be really interesting to see where the NFL drafts him, because despite that transformation of the position, we haven't really seen it reflected in draft capital yet. We've still seen these smaller players get pushed down the board, and in other cases where it's not quite as high end of a talent, that manifests as like Jalen Knoll goes third round or Josh Downs goes third round. And it's like, what the hell? Like that, in Downs' case, we were thinking about him as a potential first rounder. Knoll, we were talking about him as a slam dunk second rounder. It's like these guys are falling And it's this sizeism that still exists in the NFL,
Oh
and
yeah.
it really does. But yet then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we took Amon Ra like in the third round, but now he's like the best player on our team. And so it's like, when are we gonna stop doing that, and just take these guys where they belong?
It's a great question. Like deserves like top 15 draft capital. Whether or not he gets it, I don't know. We'll see. I hope he does.
All right, you're back up 104. I think I know who it's going to be.
Yes, you do. This is going to be Carnell Tate. So this rounds out the my three wide receiver tier. I think yours is the same, where
Yep.
we're Jeremiyah Love alone at the top, and then it's Tyson, Lemon, Tate. And I'm okay with arguments of like shifting these guys around. That's why they're in the tier together. And this was, I don't know if like a surprise is the way to put it, but I think an ascension is an appropriate way to like frame this season from Carnell Tate, because last year had 733 yards, 4 touchdowns on 67 targets, 52 catches. And it's like, okay, pretty solid season. This year, you look at the box score, pretty similar. We got 58 targets, which is less, 48 catches, which is less, and then 838 yards, which is 100 more yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 more touchdowns. So you look and you're like, how is this guy kind of on par with Lemon and Tyson, maybe? Turn him on, man, because this is like one of the best contested catch receivers. He is a technician. He has really good size. We're looking at like Tyson is about 6 foot, $195, 200 pounds. Lemon 5'11", $190, $195 maybe. Tate up at 6'3", 195 pounds, and he moves really well for being as big as he is. Just a consistent winner downfield. When, obviously you look at this Ohio State team, you look at Jeremiah Smith, you might think of that. Wide receiver twos are just as important in, these college offenses and NFL offenses. Makai Lemon was the number 2 wide receiver in this offense last year and was looking like the offensive player of the year, or the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL through like 6 weeks. So I don't think like that is indicative of anything, and that's why you see a little bit less of the like gaudy stats where you look at the box scores and it's like, man, this isn't that sexy. But when you watch this player, it's like he's really fast, which is like kind of shocking, because I felt like that was a little bit of a concern of mine coming in, was like I didn't think he was a superb athlete. And he has just incredible hands. I mean, some of the easiest, most natural just catchers of the football in this entire class. He just plucks it out of the air when he's open. And then when he's not, it's like, it's hard to pry this thing away from this guy. And that is exemplified by his contested catch percentage, which we've kind of harped on all year. But it hasn't changed. Like you kind of wait for the regression to happen, the natural regression, because like contested catches are kind of fluky, and you are like, well, it'll even back out to 50-50. It's why they call it a 50-50 ball. He's at 85%. He's 12 contested catches on 14 contested targets. Unbelievable player. And like, whether you like look at these advanced stats or not, you see it. Like, you see it on this film everywhere, where he is going up over the top. This back shoulder stuff is awesome. The burst in and out of these breaks. I mean, some of the smoothest breaks in this class come from Carnell Tate, where he is getting to the top of these routes and he's snappy. So I've been a huge Carnell Tate fan this entire season. I mean, I'm standing on the table for him. I'm going to continue to be. But yeah, love this player, despite maybe the suppressed numbers and like the yardage totals, whatever. I just think you turn this on and it's like, this is an NFL wide receiver that's going to be awesome.
It's playing behind Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
Like, put him on 98% of programs in the sport,
yeah.
and he is
1,300
yard
yeah,
player.
Right.
Like, this Carnell Tate was a player that I asked to come to me. Like, in the summer when I watched him, I was not going to project him too far. If you go back and listen to what I said, it was kind of like, I like what I'm seeing. There's a lot of things that I want to see improvement on and growth. I'm gonna just see how this season goes before I start, because there were people that were already kind of championing him in the summer, baking in a lot of that projection and all of that. And now with this season behind us, I can tell you that he's in this tier. And we're going to talk about wide receivers next week. And I'm not even going to tell you that there is not a absolute scorching take that I might uncork next week about Carnell Tate, because I've watched a little bit and I need to watch a little more. But things that I saw from Tate this year were just like, yeah, the dude's got it. He absolutely has it. And he doesn't have the numbers to back that up. He didn't have the season where it's like he's got the stat line that's putting him in the national conversation every week. And now we're going to universally talk about him as a top 10 NFL draft pick and all of that. Like, he is one of these Ohio State guys that gets pushed down the narrative ladder because he's behind another Ohio State guy. And it's like, so that's the thing to watch with Tate, is like, he doesn't have the notoriety of his counterpart. But how many times have we seen these Ohio State guys go from the number 2 at Ohio State to the number 1 on their NFL team, literally as a rookie?
They can't keep getting away with this. And
Well,
Batman is gone. So maybe
it's time to start watching USF wide receivers, I guess.
Apparently. But yeah, that's the thing, is like, if you are relying on, whatever, like what you rely on, it can't be like box score. That's why, like, we do this, and like we want to watch these guys and we want to see exactly what's going on. Because if you're just going down and you're like, who are the most productive, like, Power 5 guys, and it's like, those are my favorite players. Like, I want to have the guy with 2,000 yards. Well, that's how you end up with players that are not as good as Carnell Tate, because Tate seems like he's going to just walk in and be sick in the league, because he does everything that you want an NFL receiver to do.
Yeah. We'll talk about him more next week, but the route running is exceptional. And at this size, how smooth he is, you said it, out of his breaks, one of the best I've seen so far in this class. Catch point, I don't think he's matched. He doesn't have a drop this season, 12 for 14 uncontested. He is one of these, boundary guys who can also, like, run the full tree and win deep. So when you start talking about players like that, there's a few names that you can look at in the NFL. And when you're trying to think about, okay, what is this archetype? Where, what are the players that we've seen kind of come in with this skill set? There's a couple of those guys that kind of fit this mold that became the best wide receivers in the NFL.
Can I comp them? Never mind. I'll save it.
Let's do it next week. We might be on the same wavelength with this, but there's a teaser for next week. Don't miss the Carnell Tate discussion. But all right. So Carnell Tate rounds out this 4-player tier. It's not a single tier. It's a tier and then a tier, but this is the tier of the class, I would say.
This is where you want to be, is if you're sitting with a top 4 pick, or if you're real lucky and you have multiple top 4 picks, I think you're, holding the golden ticket of the 2026 draft.
So we want to be top 4, but let's say you just missed it. You're sitting in the 5 spot. Well, maybe that's not a terrible thing. I mean, there's still players that we like here, but I will say my board, it opens up a little bit. This is not a like I have a name that I'm sprinting up and I'm feeling great about it. Uh, in mid-season rankings, this was Jonah Coleman for me, and it's not going to be Jonah Coleman today. I am going to take Denzel Boston,
His teammate,
5th overall.
right?
His teammate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Boston is a player that really kind of fits my type, and it's been something that I've had to evolve a little bit over time because you can live and die with these guys. But I think Boston showed us this year that he's not just one of these kind of hulking
Go up
outside
and get it.
wide receivers that, yeah, like literally when like I watch him in the summer and it's like, man, I'd like to see a little bit more burst here. I'd like to see him, winning these routes a little cleaner. I feel like we saw a lot of that this year with Boston. And then, to go with all of that, getting a little better as a separator. We kind of had the conversation about like, is this one of these like new age slot guys potentially? You and I were kind of like, I don't love that for him. And I still feel that way, though I think you're going to hear that a lot through this process because it just feels like that's what we're doing with these guys now. But ultimately, I like Boston as kind of that pure outside X wide receiver playing on the line of scrimmage, winning against press coverage. He's shown an ability or a better ability this year to win deep. That was something that was very minimal on his 2024 film. I wouldn't say he like exploded this year in that area, but like it's certainly an improved skill for him. But ultimately what you're getting here is another player that has excellent hands and that can turn those 50-50 situations favorably for the offense. And we talked about him earlier this season, but the highlight reel of just his touchdown grabs this year is extensive. I mean, that it felt like every week he was making a catch that belonged on his career reel because it was that kind of year for him. So I think Denzel Boston right now for me is the player that kind of stands out once we get outside of this 4-player tier.
Yeah, I agree. I have him in the same spot. Boston for me has kind of risen, not a ton, because I had him, close to this high beforehand. But yeah, I echo a lot of what you were saying, where I really like him, which is not a common sentiment for this class, and really in a lot of classes where you have just a guy that is a pure X, where you have a guy that you don't really want to throw around and move around. And, we kind of mention a lot of these players as move players. They can play X, they can play Z, they can play F. And like, sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem because the wide receiver can't establish an identity and like maybe doesn't really work out. It isn't elite at any of those spots. So don't really love him at any of those spots. Boston, I think, found his niche and just hammered it. Like, he's like the X receiver, the guy where we are running these big routes. We're going to do, we're running flies. Maybe we're a sacrificial X on some of these plays, but then we're running these big comebacks. We're good back shoulder, excellent on these dig routes, these crossers coming across the field, sitting down on these like curl routes against zone where we're finding soft spots. And then like, the money that I think is going to get spammed in some of these offenses is this slant route that he runs, because he runs a really nice quick slant. Like, he is coming out, and whether they're like checks coming out of blitzes, if he's like manned up and this guy is outside leverage and he, one step bang inside, and I mean, you're not prying it away from him. So you get that ball in his hands immediately, and then you carry that DB another 3 yards, and you got a nice like 5-6 yard gain just like that. And so I think like that kind of I know the Packers, so Romeo Doubs is on the mind, where it's like he is money on those short yardage 3rd and 3. hit that slant route to Dobbs, use that big body, use those strong hands, and churn out some yards. And that's on top of being just an excellent downfield, big play threat all the time, and then being a really nice red zone receiver where we can run goal line fade, which is a play I don't love in the NFL, a play that doesn't feel, plus EV. But he, seems like a guy that can turn those into, like Tate, can turn those contested catches into me balls rather than, a 50-50 ball. So also, can throw the ball a little bit. He threw a touchdown this year, so it got a little bit of an arm. It looked pretty good. So had that in my notes, wanted to throw it in there. But yeah, Denzel Boston is definitely prototype X-receiver, fun player that I like on a lot of offenses.
Maybe after I get deeper into his film this year, my tune changes a little bit, because honestly, like when I think about like who are the comps, or like who are the like bodied, like skill set players, it's like you're on the spectrum. That's like Drake London is at the top, and then it's like Jaden Higgins is somewhere in that mix. And it's like all of those, like, well, those two players specifically, but a lot of those players on that spectrum ended up playing in the slot. And we like, that's what we're seeing with Higgins this year, is like, I feel like we were talking about him last year as a guy that we liked more in the slot because he had that kind of short route running ability. Like the Jaden Higgins slant routes were one of his best routes at Iowa State as well. And we're seeing that right now in the NFL, where they're running him on these quick routes out of the slot, and he's just vacuuming up the ball in these contested situations. So yeah, maybe I come away with a different perspective after watching Boston, because I feel like that's kind of what we've seen with these players. And one thing also, the last thing I want to note with him, 56 catches this year, 44 first downs.
There we go.
He's just a machine.
Yep.
That's it.
Love it.
All right. 106.
106. I'm staying with wide receiver. And I'm going to go with Elijah Sarratt here out of Indiana. Kind of this was a revelation, I think, maybe for me, where I watched a bunch of Sarratt, because a lot of this Indiana offense in general, because there's a lot of guys on this team where you're looking at Mendoza, you're looking at Sarratt, you're looking at Omar Cooper, there's a lot of these names. But Sarratt stood out to me, where I was like, what exactly, like, what's this Indiana magic that's in the air that brought him, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, has them at the 1 seed, maybe national championship favorites. But Sarratt has been a consistent machine, especially early on in this season. Has kind of tapered off a little bit as the season has gone on. I think sustained an injury against Maryland. Where he only played 4 snaps in that game. Only played 14 against Purdue. Only played 27 snaps against Ohio State. So not seeing a ton of Sarratt down the stretch. Sarratt or Sarratt? I'm going to just go between.
Sarratt.
No, it's Sarratt. So see a lot of him. But I think a theme of, some of these guys in the higher part of this is a big body. Sarratt is a physical receiver, where he is like a technician that uses his body really well. Him and Mendoza have that back shoulder fade. I mean, they are spamming that thing, because Sarratt is a threatening vertical receiver. I wouldn't say he's a burner, but he's getting open downfield pretty frequently, especially early in the season. You see that with some of these bigger receiving days, but these corners start to respect and play over the top of them, and then just like nail that back shoulder for 25, 30 yards. And then red zone stuff, he is surgical. I mean, some of these, like the game against Oregon, he had this number 7, sorry buddy, had him in hell. I mean, he was cooking him, and that's Oregon. Like that's a good school. Like that is probably an NFL there's NFL players on that defense. I don't know if number 7's going to the league after what I saw, but maybe. And so Sarratt was just like every single time he is coming off the ball, he is threatening you. And it's like whether or not he's got this separation, which he does get pretty frequently because he is like good with his feet. He has good balance. He's, always kind of feels square until he makes that cut. And it's like, where is he going to go? And then like once he's on your toes, it's almost too late already. And then he makes that break. And whether like he's not the burstiest, he's not the fastest, but then he like smoothly gets into that break. And then once you're on that back hip, it's real tough to play through Sarratt. Like he is boxing you out and getting that ball. And so I was just really impressed with the like almost felt like you're watching like a forward play and like a strong forward in basketball where he's just like sealing off lanes and he's using his body to get, between his defender and the basket and then like finding easy layups. And it's like just kind of playing at his pace, putting you in places that make you uncomfortable and then making the tough plays.
Yes, Sarratt's been a guy that has been, we've been talking about him for 2 years now. I mean, we were talking about him last year. We thought he was going to be potentially in the 2025 class. Opts to go back to Indiana. And I mean, obviously we know about the season that they're having right now and the win that they just picked up and, what this means for this program. And Elijah Sarratt is a massive part of that. He's a massive part of the story for the Indiana team over the last 2 years. And not having the statistical season this year, mostly because of the injury and missing a few games here in the late part of the season. But when we think back to the middle part of the season, he was all systems go. He was on pace for 1,000+ yard season. He was like looking like he had taken a step in the right direction in terms of his development and in terms of how, what we could project for him at the NFL level. I think a lot of that remains the same, even though, this last part of the season's been a little bit slower for him. Obviously, the injury plays part in that. This is a player for me that is, again, you're talking about a big body player that's playing on the outside. I think he has that versatility. I think he can be moved around at the next level, but I think he has a select few routes that he just really shines on. The out route has been something that just for the last 2 years, it feels like has been a consistent, weapon in his arsenal. You see him running a lot of dig routes as well, like really working that intermediate part of the field well. Slants, things like that. Like the over the top stuff is a little bit more hit and miss from him. You mentioned the ability in the back shoulder situations. That's been very pronounced this year. I think it's a player that, like, if you think about the Matt Harmon, like the reception perception tree, I think it's going to be one of these guys that has like
red,
like red and green.
Yeah.
It's going to be like the green ones and then the red ones. And there's not really a lot in between, but I really like Sarratt. Yeah. I love what he brings. I love the toughness. I love the competitiveness he brings to his routes, the physicality. And, we see it even in the conference championship game with the touchdown catch that he made on the back shoulder, the touchdown grab there. I mean, like he's a baller and he's a big reason why the Hoosiers have been able to do what they're doing for the last couple of years.
Can I comp him to Luka Doncic?
Sure. Means he's going to score 65 points a week in my fantasy lineup.
That's right.
If we're going off of fantasy basketball numbers. But all right, let's keep it moving. 7th overall, starting to whittle down into this, like, we're kind of getting into the weird territory here. I was
just going to describe it as weird, yeah.
But I am going to take Jonah Coleman at 107.
Okay.
Like, I got a couple of these wide receivers moving ahead of them.
I haven't ranked at 8 yet, so.
Okay. So I would have had Sarratt ahead of him as well. Like our boards have been very lockstep so far.
Shocking.
Shot,
We
yeah,
spend every
like
week
almost
doing
like
this
we do
together.
this every week together. But so Jonah Coleman though is still a player that excites me. I know that the season itself hasn't it hasn't gone the way that we hoped or expected based off of his early season performance. I mean, we were giving him a badge like every single week, and then all of a sudden it was like the wheels just fell off. And then I think he's dealing with some injuries. I mean, we had the week 11 against Wisconsin. He played I think he what did he have? 6 offensive snaps. He had week 13, 6 offensive snaps, 9 in week 14. Like he's just not even on the field right now. And I can't even say that I know entirely like the story behind that right now. But what I do know is that this was a player that I liked a lot. We both did coming into this season. He was our RB2, little bit of that kind of like stocky bowling ball esque running back that has some elusiveness, an ability to, get involved in the pass game as well. And this year, like some of that has admittedly like gone away. And it's like we're looking at the missed tackles force number 67 last year, 30 this year. PFF's elusiveness metric that they somehow spit
Cook up,
out.
yeah.
Now, I don't understand it, but I'll reference it when it's 153 last year and 71 this year.
Yeah.
So clearly, this was a worse year for Jonah Coleman. He did bring back this pass catching skill set that he really displayed at Arizona 2 years ago. That was on full display again this year. Career highs in receptions and receiving yardage for him. But the rushing stuff took a hit. And so I'm picking him right here based off of what I know about Jonah Coleman. But when we talk about running backs in a couple weeks, I think we're going to get to the bottom of what this season really meant for him and where he belongs in this class when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I didn't want to overreact on Jonah Coleman too much before I dug really deep and like went kind of felt things out with him. I watched some of his stuff, especially some of the like earlier season stuff when it felt like we had things a little more under control. But like the Michigan game, especially like. Had a solid game, good game receiving the ball, over 100 all-purpose yards, and it's like, what's going on where we're not turning this into like consistent performances? And I think like there's a little bit of hesitancy with Jonah Coleman's game in the backfield, and I didn't really see that on the 2024 stuff where he's kind of like almost getting flat-footed in the backfield and like unsure of his reads, and maybe like it's hard to know exactly because we don't know the play call, we don't know the blocking assignments, we don't know the gap assignments of like what hole we're running to, so it's hard to know exactly what's going on back there, but it felt like there was a little bit less certainty of where and when you're gonna like when you have to be where you're supposed to be. And so I don't know if that has to do with anything, but I really appreciated that he was more involved in the passing game because as like a stocky receiver, that's a really good goal line back. I mean, Coleman is money in those short yardage situations. Having the, receiving upside, especially if you're playing PPR or even half PPR, is like so valuable because if he's gonna churn out some touchdowns pretty consistently and like be a tackle breaker and then also have 4 catches in his bag, it's like just a consistent solid floor. So I think he is a high floor player that can have a high ceiling because of the ability that he has, that he showed a lot in 2024 and a little bit this year of like being elusive, making people miss, putting his head down pretty often where he's just going to pile drive you, but in the open field still has the sweet feet to actually get you off balance and make you miss. So I think Jonah Coleman, I still feel pretty good about him despite the suppressed statistical output. I don't feel as good about him as I did early in the season or at mid-season, but I'm not like panicking on Coleman, I wouldn't say.
All right, you're up again at 108.
108. This one is where it got weird for me. You know,
Yeah.
this 7-8 range. I'm going with Jadarian Price, running back from Notre Dame. You might be familiar with Jeremiyah Love, but Price, I think, is also a very good running back. There's a lot of people that might say, like, oh, they have the best running back room in the nation. And you're like, yeah, they have Jeremiyah Love. But, 24 is not so bad either. I went in and I was like, what's going on with this running back class was basically my outlook on sorting out this class and figuring out how I'm going to feel and how I'm going to rank these guys and what it's going to look like. And Price was surprisingly, better than I thought. I think maybe we need to truck people less, I think is my takeaway for the Price tape, because he's definitely 210. It says is listed at 5'11", 210. Maybe if you pack on 15 more pounds, we'll feel a little better, like driving ourselves into the defense. But I think maybe try to glance some of those blows and find another yard or two rather than trying to punish people. But I think the vision for Price is really like kind of unreal. I mentioned before with Jeremiyah Love, this offensive line for Notre Dame is a great run blocking offensive line. That's true. But Price, just like every single time, it felt like he was hitting the right spot at the right time. The pace of play is awesome with Price, where he is, patient when he needs to be. He's very bursty, good in the open field. I mean, he had 30 missed tackles force as an RB2. He only had 113 total carries on the season. So I was just all around pretty surprised pleasantly by Jadarian Price. He is a junior, so like don't really know if like 100% that he's going out, but I think, if he is, I feel pretty good about him.
You're ahead of me because I haven't watched Price yet.
Okay.
And I know he's getting a lot of buzz. And so I'm excited to see what we have here with this running back crew. But this is not a player that I know that much about right now.
That's okay.
So that's it.
Cool.
That's all I got.
Hey, running backs 2.0 is right around the corner.
I guess I got to get to work. Shit. All right. So 109 then. I kind of want to do something crazy here.
Do it.
But I'm not going to. And instead, I'm going to take another wide receiver. And I'm going to take Concepcion.
Nice.
Because I really liked what I saw from Concepcion this year. This is a player that was kind of one of these true freshman breakout guys at North Carolina State. Gets the little star by his name. Keep your eyes on him for 2026. Falls off the face of the planet last year at NC State. And I think it was a lot to do with the state of the team and the offense. And to be quite honest, it looked like he was pretty checked out of the situation from what I watched. And I kind of, that's not something that you love to see on film either. So it was like, I kind of, watched him in the summer and was like, no, I'm good. And he goes to Texas A&M. And luckily, that was a great team this year. Is a great team this year. And so he's engaged and he's playing great. And he's having another really, really fun season for them. Another one of these guys that's going to be a little bit on the smaller end of the spectrum, but he has that burst and explosiveness and the route running chops that compensate for the lack of size. He is one of the most explosive wide receivers, I think, in this entire class. He's got some of the best routes that I've seen on film so far this year. And he's made some big plays for them at the catch point even this year as well. He's a player that you can move around and get him like touches on the ground. Even that was a big part of his game, like even last year. So he's a versatile offensive weapon sort of player that also like is not, that's not like he doesn't have a position. He's an offensive weapon. It's like he's a wide receiver that is also a weapon on offense. So I really liked what I saw from Concepcion this year, putting himself back firmly on this sort of a radar in the 26 class.
Yeah, I have Concepcion in my next spot. Would have been my next pick too. Really impressive what I saw out of him. I mean, the speed that he has is like kind of crazy. Where whether it's running these like pretty sick deep routes that he's working a double move and then getting on top of a guy and then he's got all of a sudden in a blink 5 yards of separation, or if it's like closing a cushion that this is like somebody's playing 5 yards off of him and then he's like by the time the quarterback's in the second step of his drop, he's closed down all of that yardage and then is getting into his route by the time the quarterback's at the top of his drop, and then works really well with timing things up. So the A&M quarterback name is escaping me right now. Not a great deep ball thrower. I saw a lot of these where he's leading him inside toward like the field, the like cover 3 middle safety, and I feel like there's a lot that could have been for Concepcion where like some of these double move deep routes are like, oh my god, like he is leaving these guys in the dust, and then these are bad balls that are getting thrown his way. And but all that to be said, like a really again, maybe pleasantly surprising season out of Concepcion where you're like, I don't know exactly what to expect out of this player. I don't know if he's going to be, a factor in the top part of this draft. But you get to it and it's like, man, there are just some of these plays that are like, "Ooh, this is a special player." And I just like, it was a drop that he had, but it was sick because it was like in the red zone, this guy had inside leverage on him, and he like kind of, it almost looked like a hop step to the inside, and then bursted out of it into a slant route, and it's like beat the guy's inside release. The guy like whiffed the press, and then he was just wide open, hit him in the chest, and he dropped it. But it was like the $1 million move, 10-cent finish, I guess. But it was like that kind of summed up the experience of like Concepcion, where it's like a lot of this is really sexy. Some of it's kind of ugly, but there's a lot of, maybe high ceiling player, you could say.
Yeah, to be clear, this is still the 26 draft class after all. These are not like, this isn't like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting this guy at not like 8 or 9 or whatever. He's a fun player that flashes some skill. He's not a perfect player. And I think so that's part of this too, is like a little bit undersized. The hands can be a little bit suspect. They kind of always have been. And so, there's that all plays part in it. It's the true freshman year, by the way, is the one that I was thinking of with the rushing numbers. He had 314 yards rushing to go along with a season in which he led all true freshmen in receiving touchdowns at NC State. So that was a little bit of a glimpse, and it hasn't been perfect since that point, but I think a player that can realize his full potential potentially in the NFL. Very similar vibes to watching Evan Stewart, which is weird because Evan Stewart played at Texas A&M as well.
Helmet scouting.
But a little bit. Yeah. But I'm honestly thinking about Stewart at Oregon, where it was like, you see these explosive moments and this explosive route running, and it's like, holy shit, I can't believe he just did that. And then it's like, oh, he dropped it, or
yep.
Oh, where did he go for the rest of the game, and like stuff like that. So but regardless, we will look at the positives. We will choose to be excited about those positives with Concepcion right now.
Yep. And I think a player that lives in a similar, archetype is my next player, who's Antonio Williams.
Yeah.
Out of Clemson. And that he had a solid season, probably less than we would have liked it to have. We were talking about like we would love to see a jump out of Antonio Williams, and that might have been statistically, it might have been in the skill level what we see on tape, but kind of this whole Clemson team was a disaster. We've talked about it throughout the season, but it's like Klubnik and company, like this team kind of never really figured it out. But Antonio Williams was pretty steady. Had like at least 50 yards in all but 2 games, and one of those was a 49-yard performance. And I'm not saying that to be like Antonio Williams is a world beater, but he's a nice slot receiver that is really fun after the catch. And I think like that is something that I was excited about before the season that I really wanted to see more of. He's a good route runner. He's bursty. Like, it's kind of the same conversation that we were just having about Concepcion. I think Antonio Williams is a better route runner, not as good of an athlete, not as like fast or bursty, maybe not as good of a route runner, but I think like they're pretty similar players. And Williams also like runs the ball, and it's like he's getting these jet sweeps and he's getting open, and so I think it's a similar vibe. It's a similar conversation. A little bit of a disappointing season for Antonio Williams, while it was like an exciting season for KC Concepcion. So that's why the conversation might be, Antonio Williams is a little lower on the board. But I also think like the athletic traits aren't as good with Antonio Williams. The routes aren't as good, but the after the catch stuff is better. So I don't know. It's this is kind of where we're at, is like what traits do you value more?
I think it's the other way. I think it's Williams is maybe a better pure route runner.
Okay.
I like Concepcion after the catch a lot more.
Okay.
I think he offers a lot more explosiveness in that area. But I agree with you in terms of drawing the line between these two, because I think similar body types, similar skill sets in a lot of ways, similar deficiencies. I think for me, it's Concepcion jumps ahead because he has a little bit more of that explosiveness and offers a little bit more of that offensive creativity. But it's also, like you said, Concepcion kind of trending up, Williams kind of trending down. But within that, I think there is a little bit of like you forget with Antonio Williams, like what you saw in 2024, which was an exciting player to me. I mean, again, it's like this is a different sort of a draft class. We're not talking about these guys as like high-end talents and, oh my God, wide receiver 8's like the best player I've ever seen. But I think this is a player that can be that sort of slot option in the NFL, can be a reliable wide receiver that is a potential, factoring in as a wide receiver 3, flirting with a 2 type, maybe at points, depending on where he's at. Like that's the kind of situation that we're in here with this group. So I do still like Williams, and I'm excited to watch him and kind of see this year, because I think it's universal that this Clemson team, just like all these guys, disappointed, but I don't think all of them just got materially worse either. I think there was a lot of like the overall situation playing a part in that as well.
Yeah, I think to kind of sum up is like what versus Concepcion versus Antonio Williams is like, I think Williams may be more technical, while Concepcion is like more of an athlete.
Agreed.
And then like Antonio Williams maybe a tougher runner versus Concepcion like a make you miss kind of runner.
Agree.
Yeah.
Great way to put it. I'm up.
You're up.
And I was going to do something weird a little bit ago, and I'm going to do it right now.
Are we at 11?
We're at 10.
10. Okay.
And with 110, it's time for IDP to come off the board. And I am taking Arvell Reese.
Yeah, you are.
So when we did our check-in, and this has been a little bit weird to follow. Preseason IDP 1 was TJ Parker.
Are you sure we're not at 11?
Did I miss somebody?
I don't know. I'm looking at the list, and I feel like we've done 10 players, and now we're doing our 11th.
I was jotting them down as we went. It's possible that I
Because
missed.
we have Jeremiyah Love at 1, Tyson at 2, Lemon at 3, Carnell Tate at 4, Denzel Boston 5, Sarratt 6, Jonah Coleman 7, Jadarian Price 8,
There it is.
Concepcion 9.
I missed Price.
Okay.
That'll do it.
I was like, I feel like we're getting real
close. So this is my last pick? Oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah. That's why I thought you were
God.
getting weird, because this is your last one.
Now I got it. Yeah, now I have to get weird because...
Well, if you weren't, I would have,
So TJ Parker was the guy in the summer. Ruben Bain was the guy at midseason. And I still like Ruben Bain a lot. Don't get me wrong. But I think when you look at what has happened with Arvell Reese and also consider what he is and what he represents in terms of a fantasy upside, it's you gotta take him. Like, you have to, and I'm very curious to see how this conversation evolves over time, because it's going to be, what position is he? What does an NFL team see him as? Is he a linebacker? Is he an edge rusher? To me, this is Micah Parsons all over again. Not in the sense that this is Micah Parsons, in the sense that this is a off-ball linebacker that is actually an edge rusher. And he's going to get drafted to be an edge rusher. Because if you remember, Micah Parsons, when he was taken by the Cowboys and when he was taken in fantasy drafts, there was still an outstanding question of what position he was going to play. And at that time, it kind of felt more like he was going to be playing off the ball as a pure linebacker. And his rookie season, he played as an edge rusher and was like the best in the sport. So I think with Reese, it feels like we are trending in that direction. I think no matter what the conversation is around him, I think he is an edge rusher, and that will be what he plays in the NFL. The snaps were fairly split at Ohio State this year in terms of playing on the line, playing off the ball. But by the end of the season, he was playing much more on the line of scrimmage. He was the snaps were breaking out kind of almost opposite where they were at the beginning of the year, where in the conference championship game, he's playing 38 snaps on the line versus 16 off the ball. Ends the season with 8 sacks, and just has one of these builds, the 6'4", 243 with the explosive athleticism. That's going to make him an alluring bet in terms of the edge position for an NFL team. And I think if you consider the fact that he's almost certainly going top 5 in the NFL draft, I think he's a pretty easy case to be IDP 1.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I had him at my 12 spot. Like I said, if you wouldn't have taken him here, I would have taken him next, because if you're unfamiliar with IDP, which I know not a lot of people play IDP. If you're here and you're like, what the hell? Why is Arvell Reese being drafted? This is fantasy football.
I didn't sign up for this.
Why? I picked the Houston Texans defense and I put them in my lineup until they have a bye week. I get it. IDP means individual defensive player. It means you have like a D lineman spot. You have a linebacker spot. You have a defensive back spot. You have a flex spot for defensive players, in addition to your offensive players. Or not. You can play in a defense-only league. I do that too. It's sick. So you get to watch both sides of the ball. Also makes your drafts really interesting, because you get to draft defensive players in your first round. Like last year, I drafted Abdul Carter in the first round. It's going well. Arvell Reese we have here, and it's like you get to watch the Jets defense with renewed interest, because number 8 is flying around and trying to like kill people. And it's like you have Myles Garrett and he has 5 sacks, and it's like, oh, he has 40 points on my team. I'm going to score 260 this week. It's awesome. So if you haven't tried it, I co-sign it. Obviously, we do it on this podcast. We talk about it. We're going to have a IDP ranking show later on. If you do IDP, great job. But you get to, so that's the sum. If you don't do IDP and you don't care about this, skip to the next player. It won't be a defensive player. But I will say that I think Arvell Reese is going to be, like a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, and he's going to be given all the opportunity in the world to be an edge. I think I agree with you. He's going to be an edge rusher, which is why he's in this spot. I think that he can be one of these kind of flex players that you can throw off ball every once in a while, and like if you have certain packages where that makes sense for you, and you have like a creative defensive mind scheming your defense, then he can be an absolute weapon on your as an IDP player, but as just a defensive player in general. I think he can rack up those kind of stats where he has this high motor, he has this athletic ability plus some skill. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, he's not a like deep bag pass rusher, which is like kind of scary that he's able to do this kind of thing where it's like off of sheer athleticism. Is like he is, and that can be a concern if you want to have that as like a con on his player sheet, and you're like, doesn't isn't a doesn't have a refined pass rush skill set. I get it. But I would see it as like he already has 8 sacks on a season without being a full-time pass rusher, without being, sometimes as a blitzing linebacker, I know that, but mostly just coming off the edge and beating a guy. So I would like to, see some more improvement as he gets into the league, but that's what the coaching's for. So hopefully he goes to a good, creative defensive mind.
He was not playing on the line of scrimmage last year at all.
Right.
So when you consider the fact that this is his first season really in this role and what he's been able to do with it, just like you said, just off of athleticism, essentially, it's kind of scary to think about what happens when this guy actually develops the plan and develops the repertoire to go along with the athleticism. So, all right. That was pick 11, which means that we have reached the end of the line. You are up with our last pick of this mock 2.0. And who do we have?
A less fun pick, but Kaytron Allen is still a pretty solid player to round out the first round with. This is the Penn State running back that is not named Nick Singleton, number 13. We kind of talked about we've been talking about this Penn State backfield, this Penn State team for, I guess, 2 years now. We had Tyler Warren and Drew Aller last year. This year started with Drew Aller and Singleton, and then it ended up becoming like a Singleton-Kaytron Allen conversation, and then kind of just evolved into a Kaytron Allen conversation because he took over this backfield late in the season. Singleton's still like not a bad player, and I think if you prefer him over Allen, I get it. Like there are things that I like about Singleton too. Kaytron Allen's a grinder. Like, he is gonna work out yards. It feels like, I'm watching this and like Penn State's line isn't as good as it was last year, which is not surprising to, they had people leave and whatever, but they also a lot of stacked boxes because Aller is not on this team anymore. He got hurt, so they have a different quarterback back there and not getting shown a lot of respect by defenses. So they know they got a key on 10 and 13 in the backfield. And Kaytron Allen was given the ball a lot. Had 20-plus carries in all but one of the back half of the year from week 8 onward. And against Indiana, he had 19 carries, not 20, but he had multiple 25-plus carry games. Like, he was putting this run game on his back down the stretch and turning it into some really, really nice games, production-wise, but also efficiency-wise. So we're looking at, 7 yards per carry, 6 yards per carry, 10 yards per carry. And then most of these games he's sitting around 5, end up with a 6.2 average on the season on 1,300 yards, 210 carries, 15 total touchdowns with only 1 fumble. So a consistent player. I have some questions about vision. I have some questions about like the long speed. But when it comes to like picking spots, putting your shoulder down, getting dirty yards, and then having a little bit of speed to burn once you get into that open field, I feel really good about Kaytron Allen.
Are you trying to tell me that the 2026 running back class is back?
I was pleasantly surprised with a few of these guys. I'll say that because I was as dubious as everybody else. But like I said, I went into watching for this mock draft is like sorting out this running back class. That was my main goal, and I was like, Kaytron Allen's not bad. Jonah Coleman, I still feel pretty good about. Jadarian Price, I was pleasantly surprised by, and obviously Jeremiyah Love is like the cherry on top, where it's like the shoe in. So I'm not saying it's like a good running back class. I'm just saying that like I think there are some guys that are going to be drafted in the first round of your dynasty drafts that are, going to be like could be productive backs in the league.
Well, let's see if I agree with you in 2 weeks because again, I said it last week. I'm excited to watch Kaytron Allen because I watched him in the summer and I thought he was kind of mid.
Yeah.
He's having a hell of a year and I'm really excited to watch it and see what it looked like. So you're trying to tell me it was pretty damn good. Now I'm even more excited to watch it.
Yeah.
So
he's a grinder, man.
We will get very deep into the inner workings of this 2026 running back crew, and maybe we will have a war of words on that episode, trying to build this as like a Mayweather Jake Paul situation or something. But just trying to sell pay-per-views. All right.
Hey, it's got to make money somehow, right?
But that is our first round, one round mock 2.0 2026. I think again, it's like we talked about this class kind of in the context, like throughout the season in terms of like, it's kind of surprising us a little bit. There's been some names. And I think for me, it's really seen in this wide receiver group where there's a lot of names that have kind of climbed the ladder, both guys that were kind of more in the middle or end of this conversation in the summer to now being at the top of the list, and also guys that have kind of come, and really established themselves or reestablished themselves at Concepcion. And there's a lot of wide receivers after the ones that we picked that I think are really exciting as well. So that's one round. But if you are looking at your board and you're getting ready to kickstart the second round, who are the guys right now that are catching your eye?
I wasn't prepared for this question.
Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yeah. You can go. Let me think.
Well, I think first and foremost, we don't have a tight end here in round one. I think Kenyon Sadiq, we've kind of been tiptoeing towards this point for the entire season. And I think both of us kind of came to the realization through this one that Kenyon Sadiq probably going to end up as tight end one for both of us. And I think he probably belongs in the conversation in the short list of guys coming up in this one. I'm going to include Ruben Bain in there as well. Just because I took Reese doesn't mean that I'm fading Bain here. I think Bain still belongs in this fringe first conversation for me. And then some wide receivers that I'm still, thinking about, excited about. Top of the list right now for me, honestly, Jeremy Bernard. Like, I'm kind of down for Jeremy Bernard. Yeah. Like that, even literally just the game that this last weekend against Georgia, like the play that he made in the middle of the field, stiff arming the guy, making the yak play, getting into the end zone. Like, he's been a really, really fun watch this year. A player that we were kind of keeping eyes on as a Washington transfer when Kalen DeBoer moved over to the Rolling Tide, and it was like, what's he going to be here? Is he going to develop? He was the number 4 guy behind.
Tide?
Huh?
Did you just call him the Rolling Tide?
What did I say?
The Rolling Tide.
The
Roll Tide.
Crimson Tide.
The Crimson Rolling Tide.
That's they fraudulently made the playoffs, so they don't deserve to be called the correct name. But yeah,
some names that I have.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got my list up now. The quarterbacks didn't make this because this is not a super flex draft. But Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, if those guys are any of those guys are your flavor, then maybe they find their way to the top of the second round for you. It feels like these in non-superflex quarterbacks kind of get forgotten, and then you start like scraping them together, and then one of these guys goes number one. It's like you just could have a automatic every week starter in your lineup. So don't forget about quarterbacks if you're in a non-superflex draft. And then there are some of the names that you didn't mention, like Jacoby Lane, I like out of USC. Jeremy, you mentioned Justice Haynes. I need to do some more work on out of Michigan.
Got hurt, and you
yeah.
quickly forget about Justice Haynes and the season he was having.
It's
but
true.
He's very much still in the conversation.
Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee was in my first round mid-season. Not there right now, but still had a fun year. I think like some of the wild cards I would say are like Nick Harbor, I think is like going to be the combine guy this year, where he's going to take over the combine and run like.
You think he's going to declare?
I don't know for sure. Like I'm just saying, like in the world that he does is like he'll, or this, copy paste this on to next year, where he'll be the combine guy and, run a 4.32 and jump 47 inches in the air. And I'll be like, oh my God. There's Cooper Barkate, keep the name in mind, my guy out of Duke. But no, a lot of names in this draft, a lot of like, I don't know exactly how I feel about a lot of these players. That's what these tape deep dives will be. But I think the 2026 class is like kind of top heavy. And then after that, it's like a pretty big flat tier after like pick 8. So,
and the good news for us is that we're about to sort through that mess that happens after that tier and then some, because we have, I to be quite honest with you, I think that this first round could change substantially in a month's time. Like once we've gone through the guys, because it's like we're talking about with the late part of the round. It's very wide open. It's a very expansive tier of guys. You're not talking about things very concretely yet. I think we're going to get into it here, and it's going to start to clear up a little bit, and we're going to start to really understand also what is the strength of this class, because it seems like there's a lot of names that have emerged, but how many of these are like, oh yeah, that's a name, versus like, oh yeah, that's a player that I can hope that my team takes in the 5th round because I kind of liked him, right. That type of stuff. So
yeah.
But that all begins next week. Wide receivers. We are not starting with quarterbacks this year. We are diving into the deep end. We are getting real nice and familiarized with this wide receiver group once and for all. I'm not sure how many we are going to rank. I think typically we do 8. We might do that again. Maybe we do more. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Find out next week.
Show up and find out next week. So, but that's where we're headed. Wide receivers will be coming next week, and then it is all systems go from that point forward. So, if you enjoyed our mock 2.0 second stab at the mock for the year, be sure to find us on Twitter, camp_dynasty, and TikTok, camp.dynasty. And if you are watching this mock draft on YouTube, hello, and thanks for joining us. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel as Collin fuzzes out
rack out of focus. Yeah.
But because we appreciate that. If you enjoyed stopping by here this week and hanging out with us, and if you're listening on the pod feed, audio only folks, be sure to like and follow and rate and
comment,
leave a review if you want. Yeah, leave a comment on Spotify. Got a nice comment from Jay last week. Appreciate you, Jay. Thanks for tuning in. So that's it. And now, Collin, we head to the Bat Cave and lock ourselves in for 7 days, no social contact allowed.
That's right, exactly.
Except we both have to go to work.
Well, maybe at work too. I'll be
Yeah,
have
just a little bit.
on my second screen have the all 22 rolling just to catch it in the peripheral and sear it into my brain.
Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.